Wow, thank you so much, Matt. Yeah, look out for my new paper on societal impact coming out. Societal footprint. That is a brilliant idea, isn't it? A brilliant idea? Would it kind of work the kind of way that when you're getting into heaven or hell, that if you had a negative societal footprint, you go to hell, and if you had a positive one, you go to heaven? Is that what you're thinking there?
That's generally how religion works.
That's exactly how religion works, from my understanding too. So that is excellent. We've cracked a new religion. We're there. That's going to make up for the financial stuff as well, because we can charge people for it. Excellent. So I've got a few questions for you, Matt, and then we'll obviously open up the floor for questions. But my first question for you, you didn't go to university in the end, which I didn't know. But if you could make one class in university compulsory for all students, what would that class be?
I think...
I mean, kind of not a subject, but something that everyone should learn.
Yeah, I think there's something. If I think about my own journey and what's been the most useful thing that I've learned over the last 10 years, it's about how we understand ourselves better, and a really key part of that is understanding our weaknesses. It's so important because our weaknesses are kind of what we tend to fall down on, or what cause the problems in life. So I think a bit more, I mean, I'm not one to focus on negatives, but I think it's really important to understand, as well as understanding where your strengths lie, understanding where you're not so strong, because then you can supplement that in your life with the people around you.
That's a great idea. Do you think part of the reason why maybe in this age we're very much focused, well, people on social media at least tend to be very good at talking about their strengths, but when you talk about weaknesses, it's something that isn't quite as it's not something which people tend to shout about as much in social media. So I think there is it's part of our contemporary life.
Yeah, I mean, and not just social media. I mean, I think it's people want to they want to show that they're strong, I mean, I think it's only natural. I mean, it's that sort of dreaded interview question. If you sit down and someone says, what's your weakness? What's your biggest weakness? And people always say, I'm just too organised. But I think there's something around, it was transformational for me personally in my journey of running an organisation and developing it and having the confidence to actually make it better, was understanding that the stuff that I just couldn't do. I mean, I'm not very organised. I'm rubbish at finishing things, and actually, it's important to know that, because if you know that, then you can fix it. And I don't mean about me then suddenly making myself organised. It's making sure the people around me within my organisation and that can complement. I mean, I spent a long time. People talk about imposter syndrome quite a lot when they're in positions of leadership or whatever, and I think part of that is because a lot of people think, I don't really know everything, but I need everyone to think that I do. And we don't. Come on, we're human. I mean, you only have to look at some of the most high-profile people in the world. You can see their weaknesses or their, and it's just so important, I think, to be connected to those.
Excellent. And just a piece of advice for our students here, that you make the point that you don't have to be the all-rounder, and that actually it's good to then supplement your team with the skills that you don't have. Would you encourage people to specialize, or would you encourage them to be generalists? What do you think works now?
I think I'm a big fan of playing to your strengths. I mean, think about sort of a football team, for example.
Southampton, maybe.
Yeah, it could be Arsenal.
Could be Arsenal. Could be Arsenal.
Let's talk about someone like Harry Kane, shall we?
Let's talk about Harry Kane.
No, but think about a football team. if you've got your star striker who's like really good in his role, you wouldn't put him as a manager. You wouldn't put him in goal because you think he needs to improve that part of his game. I think it's really, really important that you play to people's strengths. I don't mean that you shouldn't always try and improve, but I think sometimes we are at a risk of just trying to fix things that, hey, come on, we're just never going to fix it. You know, and far better that if we can just improve what we know that we're good at and become specialists and experts than trying to kind of level everything out and end up actually being really demotivated and really frustrated.
Great. You've had such a zigzag journey, haven't you, in many ways? So there must have been many times when you were disheartened, things didn't go right, or as you'd expected, as you'd wanted. Can you think of one moment of adversity or something that maybe felt like failure at the time that, looking back, you're now grateful for?
I mean, zigzag is a good point. I mean, I've done lots of different jobs that have actually, I think, really well fed into what I do in some ways. Oh God, I mean, I've had some very dark nights where I've just thought, what am I doing with my life? You know, I'm selling Yellow Pages advertising. I don't know if anyone remembers Yellow Pages, but they used to get me to try and sell Yellow Pages advertising to people after the people that owned the business have died. So imagine what that's like. So there's been times when I've done awful jobs. I think within my current work, it challenges me pretty much every day. And there have definitely been times when I've wanted to just run off into the hills and, I don't know, kind of forage for food or something. I don't know. I'm not a big lover of raw fruit, but actually it's just that notion of pushing on, of understanding that things are kind of okay. They're a bit bleak, but you know, if I just keep sort of pushing, I can get back up out of the slump that I'm in and push on. And it's difficult and it shouldn't be forced. And a lot of it's about understanding who you are personally. And like it took me a couple of years of counselling to be able to better understand who I am as a person and be a bit more connected to my emotions and things. But so I've had lots of those times, but it's just being able to kind of, especially with Soco, it's understanding that it has such a positive impact on other people's lives. That's just kept me going.
Yeah, excellent. Right. What's one bad piece of advice that you hear being given to people, you know, whether it's in the music industry or in social entrepreneurship or just generally in life, that you think is dangerous advice?
I still do from time to time, but I quite often go and talk to music students, and I get introduced as Matt Salvage from the music industry, and I'm absolutely not what they're expecting. They're expecting someone from a label or a recording studio or production house or something, and I'm from a dusty little corner of the music industry that kind of actually does positive stuff. But there's something that I tell people quite a lot, which is it's almost seen as like a negative of the, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that's seen as, it's, you know, almost doesn't matter what you know, it's who you know. And I kind of quite like turning that on its head somewhat and thinking, actually it is who you know. It's not a huge problem that you have to know the right people. You just have to get out there and make sure you're connecting and that you know people. It can be really difficult, and I think people are a lot more open these days about how things like networking or talking to strangers can strike fear into people. And, you know, people are far more open these days about anxiety and stuff. But I do think connecting with people is massively significant. If any one of us kind of looks around the room this evening, I'm sure that the majority of people here we don't know. And what's really interesting is that is that any one of these people could knowing them could have such a huge, significant impact on your life. Now, I'm not suggesting we all swap numbers and hang out again, but we could do if you want to. It's up to you. But I do think that it's an opportunity to talk to each other. I mean, I do a lot of networking. Sometimes I hate it. I just don't want to talk. Sometimes I just don't want to talk to people. I just want to put my head in my coffee cup or whatever and just disappear into a corner. But sometimes it's all of the great opportunities that I've had over the last 10 years have come out from me just going and talking to people. So I think tonight, after I've finished gabbing on and stuff, I think once we're off getting coffees or what else is in there? Snacks?
Oh, it's going to be a feast in there, man.
Feast.
It's a feast.
When we're eating our roast swan or whatever it is in there, and don't, just come and talk to each other, and maybe by me saying it's really hard, maybe might help a little bit if you're not normally, you could say, we're supposed to talk to each other, let's talk, because you never know what kind of connections you might make.
That is fantastic, and it makes me think of, a couple of things. The first is the idea that someone like you, who comes across as very confident, can still struggle in these networking situations. So those of us who may be introverts or see ourselves as introverts, that we can still succeed and we can still make connections if we think about that whole process of networking as not making small talk and being smarmy, but about making connections, as you said, and having meaningful conversations, which we can all do, right, regardless of our personality.
Yeah. I think there's icebreakers. It's something that people think about with terror, and they, if you're at a conference or it's like, we're going to do an icebreaker, let's play human bingo or some nonsense. But they can sometimes feel like the worst idea in the world, but actually they just get people connecting in a way that they otherwise wouldn't. And I hate the idea of an icebreaker, but actually they're brilliant because they do connect people. Like when you do sort of speed dating, networking and stuff like that, it just forces you to connect with someone. And I think that what are we if not the connections that we have in our life,
Yes, absolutely. We are the connections we have in our lives. I love that. So my final question to you before we open it up to the audience is, which song or songs have helped you through a tough time?
So you did prime me a bit on that.
I did a little bit, yeah.
Oh no, I'm not going to be able to answer that. And I think when I was a teenager, I listened to quite a lot of sort of grunge, like Nirvana's second album, Smells Like Teen Spirit, stuff like that.
Sorry, just for the people who are younger than 30, how would you describe grunge?
Wow. So, okay.
It's terrible, we have to explain grunge, but we might need to explain grunge here.
So imagine me with like long hair, baggy jeans, in a garage with a guitar, holding it so low that now my wrists don't work properly, playing very loud, distorted music with someone sort of drumming along and us loving it and everyone else within a mile radius thinking, I'm going to go and kill those kids in a minute. That's kind of grunge music. So, that was really important to me at a time in my life when sometimes having a stereo on very, very loud with very distorted guitar music was actually the only way I could find any peace. Does that make sense? And what's interesting is sometimes I'll be in the car and I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. Like a song will come on, like some stupid, like loud teenager grunge song will come on the radio, and I'll just kind of well up and just be an emotional wreck for like 5 minutes while this kind of headbanging music is playing in the car. It's quite, that's really symbolises how the connection that music can really have with people. I think everyone's probably got a track that is important to them. Music can get us through the really tough times, and it can get us through the happiest times as well. So, yeah, just live for the music, guys.
So what about the music?
Yeah.
What happened to you? No, that's That's great. Grunge is amazing. Just thinking about grunge brings back so many memories. And nothing about grime, and it sounds like grunge, but it's got nothing. There's nothing like grunge. But maybe it's
they do both begin with a G.
They do begin with a G, along with garage.
Yeah. Gospel.
Gospel.
Gregorian chanting.
Gregorian chanting.
I'm sure there are more.
There are probably a lot more. Excellent. So there are all the questions that I have from that right now. So let's have your question. So in the typical Orthodox fashion, if you have a question, please raise your hands. We've got two that have crept up. I will start with the question from the gentleman in the back, and then the lady here in the jacket. So would you like to go first?
So you talked about the lack of representation of more contemporary musical culture within a lot of provision. Do you think that modern culture moves too fast for curriculum or traditional provision?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question, actually. Modern culture moving too fast. I find most interesting is that when for a little while we were doing open music making sessions in Hoglands Park in Southampton. There's like a little building next to the skate park, and we would we've got a load of kit in there, and we get kids to come in and for this was only about 6 months ago. I'd be hosting these young people, and it would basically be just like a jam session, and people would bring their guitars or they'd want to play music, and I was always amazed because they would come in and want to play the music that I played as a teenager: Nirvana, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Metallica. It was the same stuff. So in some ways, it's really interesting how modern culture, it moves really, really quickly, but then it also can be quite static. Curriculum, I mean, that's a whole nother thing, really. I mean, I tend not to get involved in curriculum stuff. We operate on the outside of sort of mainstream music education, but I've got the experience of my son who's 14. He's now got long hair. He plays bass. He likes Nirvana. He is doing BTEC music at school, and it's not massively relevant to him, the music that he's learning, but it is providing the baseline for him. He's learning. He's sort of learning the fundamentals, really, of music. Actually, I never learned. I never learned that. I mean, I'm not massively knowledgeable about music, to be honest. But yeah, the idea of culture moving so fast. Wow. I mean, I think some of the mediums that music goes through. What was that?
I have no idea what that was.
I liked it.
Yeah, I think it's just. I think it may be a notification of some kind.
Okay. Yeah. So I think some of the platforms that deliver the music to us are moving so fast that actually we find it really difficult to keep up with that. I don't know if that answers your question at all, but it was a hard one.
Yeah. Maybe.
Chat after.
Yeah.
There's some interesting ideas there.
Lady over here in the jacket.
Right. So I know you talked about working with children with challenged behaviour.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how were you able to convince, especially needy carers such as parents or the school as an organisation, how important it was for them to release their creativity? Because I know for certain groups, like coming like from my minority group, we don't view art and music as a way of learning. So I was wondering what methods you use to sort of get this idea out there.
Yeah, okay. That's a really good question. So how do we demonstrate the positive impact to schools or to families and things? I think it's about it is just about sort of literally demonstrating and showing. As an example, we do quite a lot of work in inclusion units. So within a school, there will be, and they're called lots of different things, but generally an inclusion unit will be where a young person will go if they're being disruptive or if they have showing challenging behaviour and they need to kind of be separated from mainstream to stop disrupting. And sometimes that is almost like a holding pen before they then end up being excluded completely, or it's sort of as young people come in. Quite often, there's very much a focus in those areas on the sort of core subjects. So, we've gone into inclusion units, and the young people are only learning maths, English, ICT, that kind of stuff, and there isn't really much provision around art. And then we'll kind of appear because we've got funding from somewhere, and we'll do music workshops with those young people. And every time it happens, the teachers will say, "Oh, I've never seen him so engaged. I've never seen him sit down for an hour and do something. I've never seen that person be so kind of interested in a subject." And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about when I was in primary schools up in London. It's like, it's almost feels a bit quite obvious that you have to engage people with something that they value, that they find interesting. And I think that's why I felt that it was so important to set something up that was around contemporary, modern, relevant music activity. Our most recent project that I'm really, really excited about is we are developing in Southampton an urban music development unit. So we've got a bit of funding. It's from the police. We've kind of managed to pull it in from serious violence money that the police had. And we're going to be employing 2 people in the city to be developing, providing like a visible progression opportunity for young people in urban music. So grime, hip hop, that kind of stuff. And I think it's families, it's a bit more difficult because quite often the young people might be in their challenging circumstances can vary widely. But certainly with schools, just by showing that actually a young person is not, just because they don't fit that school's kind of setup, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that child. There's something wrong with the system, We're doing a lot of work around being more trauma-informed as an organisation, which is fascinating work, actually, because it makes you, basically, if you're working with someone that's showing challenging behaviour, it's not about why are you being like that, it's about sort of asking what's happened to you. We work with kids that live in tents in the New Forest, that come into school and they're kicking off and they're being really disruptive. But, if you live in a tent, that's kind of the starting point. And then if all they're doing is being given sort of maths and English to do, then it's, there's no surprise. If you need to sort of reach out to young people and find something that they're passionate about as well. And that's so important. And then from that, you can then start introducing other things, and that might lead to sort of more engagement in wider education. Does that? Yeah?
I'll have the next question again. Because you talked about now working with adults, sort of like in the mental health setting related. Could you elaborate on how you people make the psychological impact on that? Because they're not like children where you approach it the same way. It's sort of they've had their experience in their own views in life.
Yeah.
So how is it that you're still able to sort of make this footprint, I guess?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, a lot of our work is working in partnership with other agencies. So, we might work with someone like Solent Mind locally, or Society of St James. So it might be a housing project, it might be a homelessness project, it might be a mental health project, and we'll sort of do music making sessions. Quite often, it starts with it's sort of something to do or something new to try. That's quite often how it starts. And then from that builds connections, friendships, getting a bit hooked on doing something that they really enjoy, having fun, doing something that makes you feel quite happy. A lot of our work with adults in recovery from substance misuse, some of the guys that we've worked with, quite a big problem is around dual diagnosis actually within the health sector. So someone might have a mental health issue and they might have an addiction, and quite often they won't treat both things like holistically. They'll have to get one fixed before they work on the other, which makes no sense really to anyone. And sometimes we will, we won't sort of make that judgment. We won't say to someone, okay, you're in recovery from substance misuse. Oh, you've just got a mental health problem, then you shouldn't be together, So we very much work on it's about the activity. It's not about the problem that people have. We just try and make music making accessible and fun. And it works because people come back and value it. Some people we've worked with for like 8 years and they still come to our sessions, and we see them laugh every time they're with us, and I bump into them in the street and they're like friends now, But I just think that there's quite often the focus can be on the cause of an issue or on sort of actual treatment. Let's focus on the condition. I've seen courses that, let's talk about your paranoia, and actually let's not focus on that. Let's focus on being a happy person.
Right. Any more questions for Matt? Yes. Okay, we've got 2 more questions. So I'll take one question from the back. Would you like to go? Magnus, do you want to ask the question? And then we'll have a last question here.
So I want to ask what kind of steps you have to take to set up the project. So, how do you start a social enterprise? Because you just said you started it.
Yeah, I was very vague about that point, wasn't I? So what the steps that I needed to take to set it up? Okay, so bear in mind, I had no idea what I was doing at the time. I totally made it up as I went along. That's not necessarily great advice, I realise that. But it really was a case of, I don't know what I'm doing, let's take each step as we go. Right, we need this, we need this, we need this. Social enterprise, 10 years ago, social enterprise still felt like quite a new thing. It was still a bit of a buzz thing, there around social enterprise. There was actually support out there for small businesses. There was quite a lot of stuff around, this was before the financial crash and everything just plummeted financially. So there was a lot of support out there around people setting up their own businesses. So we kind of tapped into some of that, some business support. There was also a brilliant organisation in Portsmouth called CIBAS, C-I-B-A-S, Creative Industry Business Advisory Service. They're not there anymore. There's probably still remnants of them online, but they provided sort of some courses and networking opportunities. We leaned on a lot of people, a lot of other organisations, or Community Action Hampshire provided some support. There was a brilliant guy, and he's sadly no longer with us, but he helped us write our first governing document. So there's in Southampton, you've got SVS, Southampton Voluntary Service. You've got the Creative Growth Southampton or something, I think, which is a business service in that's part of the Chamber of Commerce. And so there's lots of these kind of structural organisations that can help. The other thing is find a social enterprise that's a bit like what you want to be and take them out for a coffee is another one. Or lunch. Lunch is better. You know, I'm always happy to be taken out for lunch. But I think that there's, you know, because actually we're, as sort of social organisations, we sort of tend to naturally be sort of quite sharing and generous. So, you know, I like to think I've helped other organisations grow and get off the ground. But it was a real learning curve, but it's probably made us all the stronger for it, I think.
Great. Hope that answered that question, but as Matt said, obviously opportunities afterwards to chat over food. Last question from the lady here.
I was just wondering about volunteer opportunities, like with Soco, if there are a chance for people, like students or anyone, to either volunteer or even go in for music making?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So volunteering opportunities. Yes. 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 Please. Yes. So as an organisation, we are project funded. So one of my team will find an opportunity to go and work. We'll develop partnerships. We'll go and fundraise. We'll get grant funding. We'll work with other organisations to raise money. It's important that the people that deliver our work are generally speaking are paid because they're professionals and they're trained. However, volunteers are really important to us on so many different levels, and I'm glad you asked that because it means I can raise something that I was supposed to talk about, which I haven't. Volunteering with Soco, this is something actually, when I talk about our societal footprint, this is something that I think can score you lots of points. It's kind of where you put your energy and what you do in the community. Volunteering doesn't just mean working in a charity shop or sort of picking up litter and things like that. Volunteering can be incredibly rewarding on lots of different levels. I mean, because I don't really pay myself very much at Soco, so I probably volunteer quite a lot of my time, to be honest. But I'm also a trustee of another organisation. That's a volunteer role, to be a trustee of a charity. Within Soco, we can sort of host volunteers, whether they are helping sessions. So we might have a session, say, where we're working with 10 home-educated young people, and our music leader will be doing sort of fun music activities. But sometimes, if there's a lot of young people around, it's always good to have an extra pair of hands doing sort of little separate activity. We can always utilise support from people with marketing, finance, every bit of running an organisation. But we are also transitioning to a charity over the next few months. So we're currently a non-profit, but we will be becoming a charity for various reasons. But part of becoming a charity is developing a really strong board of trustees. And they will effectively be running the organisation. I'm going to be relinquishing my ownership of Soco Music Project to a board of trustees who will then steer the organisation going forward. I'll still be around, but it's about those trustees doing a lot of work around strategy, around oversight, and that's a volunteer role. And really, I don't think there's enough people. There's not enough young people. When I say young people, I'm talking about pretty much all of us in the room. Let's all call ourselves young people, okay? But there's not enough young people involved in charity trusteeship. It's quite a skill and it's a job of work. And I'd love to talk to people about what it means to be a trustee. It's not just sort of a vanity project that you kind of show up 4 times a year and just sort of sign off the accounts and stuff. It's about actually supporting an organisation to develop and become great. And I know that there is some work through the Social Impact Lab around young trustees coming up. And as we transition to a charity over the next couple of months, we will definitely be looking for trustees to come on board and help us as we go through to the next level. Is that okay? Yeah, cool.
Thank you, Matt. And about the trustee role, so we will be promoting the trustee role obviously through the Social Impact Lab website, Facebook and mailing list. So do subscribe so we can keep you all informed, but you obviously have the chance to talk to Matt directly when we have our feast session in a little bit. I'm overselling this a little bit, aren't I? I really need to watch that. Final question from me for Matt. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self if you could go back in a time machine, in a DeLorean, and what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh God, it's really interesting because I don't think my 20-year-old self would listen to me, and I probably would advise him not to. I'd go back just before and say, I'm going to come back, don't listen to anything I say, and ruin it for me. It's a really difficult question. I think I'm 25 years on from there. I think I've needed all of that time to kind of grow into this role of what I'm doing. I've needed all of this experience and all of the terrible, terrible jobs and mistakes that I've made. And I've needed to go through every sort of little bit. I don't think there's a shortcut, really. I don't, and I think I'm not saying that my 20-year-old self couldn't be doing something like I'm doing now, but I feel like I've needed to go through quite a journey. I've gone from being like someone looking for something easy and enjoyable to being incredibly motivated and ambitious and driven. I think I probably would have said, just kind of stick with it, don't maybe. I'm trying to think of something witty now to say. Maybe make sure you kind of wash those grungy clothes a little bit more often.
Great advice, isn't it? Wash your clothes, especially if they're grungy.
When I was 20, I mean, come on.
Yeah, didn't even know what a washing machine was, I suppose, then. Incredible. Did we even have washing machines back then?
I mean, my mum had a washing machine.
She had a washing machine, yeah. Wow, thank you so much, Matt. I just want to say personally, this has been a great conversation, and I've loved hearing your insights. You've so much wisdom packed into this talk. So I hope you've all enjoyed listening to Matt. Can we please have a really big round of applause and thank you to Matt Salvage. Thank you.